All right. I wanted to do this kind of in the style of the way I did it originally with Memories of Ice, if you've been with me since then, or House of Chains. Certainly at the start of these books, I liked doing something that, it's still just talking, but it's not just my quick rambly thoughts at the end of a chapter or midway through the chapter. So if you haven't followed me before with any of my other ones, I would mark up my books like crazy. And that forced me to look through paragraphs sometimes multiple times and really try to fish out what Steven Erikson was putting into these. And the more you do that, the more you just can appreciate it. Now, I did that pretty consistently with books 3 until now. Sometimes towards the end of the book, I would just kind of run through. And there were some chapters in books before that I would do audiobook, a chapter here or there, but not very often. But this one, I decided I'm not going to use a pen. And it has affected how I read it a little bit, where I've just kind of ripped through, looking for the story and being confused about the characters, but not really rereading much this time around. This is the first one I haven't done that. But this chapter gave me pause a little bit, and it gave some of those earlier vibes of how I went through these chapters. And so I wanted to kind of do something like this again for at least this one, because it really hit me. I loved this chapter. This is a series highlight moment for me, one of the things that happened in this chapter. And I wrote a few notes just so I don't forget some of the other things, like Rudalal and Silchus at the start, on their way to this Odotaral dragon, which was brought up before, now brought up here. And I still don't understand totally what the Odotaral is or what it's made of. Is it like fossilized? Is it like the oil? Does it come from fossils and stuff like that? Or did it get deposited here? Like, this is mostly on 7 cities, but it is on Genebacus a little bit. Karsa did stuff with the Odotaral. So that's interesting. And another thought that came to me when reading this early on is they were talking about their past and brought up Udinus again and what happened to him. Like, she just popped out of nowhere, then ran off. And that's oversimplifying. But I didn't quite consider the mothers, these like, it happens a few times. Didn't quite consider that they would be searching for, like, the other side that would, that they're searching for a male that best kind of they want for their son or their child or whoever, their offspring. So I didn't quite consider it as being as selective as it just made out. It seemed like it was so random for some of these. But maybe there was something in Troll. Maybe there was something in Udinus. I don't know, but that thought kind of came to mind a little bit, and it got me thinking. We got Withel, and they are on their way out, and a Forkrel shows up. It seems like that's happening more and more. So, like, I still don't think this is the one from House of Chains, but a Forkrel shows up and, like, decapitates the horse out of nowhere. And then the Nocts, which are males, Nocts, transform, which is awesome. We had Badal. Is that her name? Her thinking about adulthood struck me when reading this. And this chapter, I could have marked like crazy, and I might start marking it. I might go back to that when we get to the crippled god, and maybe even from here on a little bit in Dust of Dreams. But this had the makings of stuff I would mark like crazy. And it started really with this Badal thinking about, first thinking about the past, and also thinking about a future that she probably won't have, which is like the saddest thing. And this so much of Malazan has really tackled what happens after these terrible conflicts with adults and what happens with the kids. Anyway, we get to Caliph, who is quickly becoming someone that I really am interested in. I really wasn't so much up to this point, but this, I just loved it. And she has this dream. And Whiskey Jack is there, and Dujek, and Mallet, and Trots, and I can't remember the other ones that are named, but they are there. And they are now posted at Hood's Gate, which is so exciting, the implications of that. And it's so interesting that, you know, it's the last thing they will do. And if you wanted anyone at that gate, which seems important and it seems selective about things, why wouldn't you want Whiskey Jack being the one for this? Now, what are these things? I wrote a couple things down. So that started to give me chills when I was going through this chapter. He says that they are more than the Reaper ever was, speaking of Hood, not distant, remembering what it was like to be alive. When no other choice remains, call upon us. They'll also mention that. And I've just been waiting for this moment. If you watched during House of Chains? Yeah, House of Chains. That's when I was already getting my hopes really rising for a return of the Bridge Burners. And we started to get these hints that maybe if Fiddler or Callum can get into Raraku, maybe the Bridge Burners will be back. And so I was holding on to it. And when they kind of came back in a way in that dreamlike form, I was like, good, but I don't get it. So it wasn't really what I was hoping for. And then again, I got so upset at the end of Bone Hunters when Fiddler, you know, it's a beautiful moment looking back on it, but I thought, why are you doing this eulogy for the fallen Bridge Burners when all this stuff is happening? And I wanted them to be actually back, and I still didn't have an inclination that they were going to be actually back in some way. And then in Toll the Hounds, I got really excited by the end there. And here, it finally feels like we got a connection with the Bridge Burners being back in a more tangible way. Instead of in Dragnipur and what was happening there, it's like they're here. So I got that kind of feeling, and that's what got me finally excited for what I was hoping for way back in House of Chains. Okay? And I love their station, what they're being told that they, I've just been waiting for it. And when speaking of protecting the Kachane Chamal and even leading them, this Caliph. Is that her name? Am I getting her name wrong? Calith, right? She even asks if the Kachane Shamal are even worth preserving. And I love that they say that it is not for her to decide that. And I don't know why. Like it like I think of there's like a verse in Exodus that I always thought was kind of cool. Like I didn't quite understand, but it reminded me of that. It's like don't spare, I might be getting, it's like don't spare judgment on the poor, which is a weird verse to like remember, but it's in a sense when casting judgment, it's like don't give unfair it's about what you're doing. It's not about the person so much. Like you don't unfairly favor the poor just because they're poor. And in the inverse, don't unfairly treat the rich just because they're rich. Like see people on an individual thing, see it about what they're doing. And it reminded me of that, which is, that's a pretty good rule to follow, because I think so often, we want to favor the poor. We want to favor the people who already have things that are hard, but that's not really, a justice system has to be above simply that. And I don't know why it reminded me, but I think it was like, it's not your choice to decide with what Whiskey Jack is saying here. And it also made me think like so much of this is about memory and about the past, even the very distant past. Like we're talking hundreds of thousands of years if you're talking about guys like Calor. And I love that Whiskey Jack seems like one who can really see through people's, he can, it just seems like he's the type that would do things right? Or really be able to maybe extend some mercy when stuff is long past, right? People who, anyway, I feel like we will get more of that in this chapter. That's why it just kind of gave me chills, and I just love Whiskey Jack. Let me get back on track though. Where did I? So anyway, it's interesting that she will not only follow them, she will lead them eventually. And it's not exactly the same, but like we know that the Kachane have weird stuff in their past. And we've seen that the Barghast have some weird stuff in their past and in their current. Karsa certainly had all sorts of stuff in his past. We've seen some awful stuff with the Edur and the awful stuff with the Lethery. Like when do we... Yeah, it's the memories of ice thing. It's like you are stuck with that. You are stuck with what happened before, and think of like the Edur. Still, think of fear, still holding that grudge between Scabandari and Silchus after all this time. It's like, when can we pull away from some of those things? And I think that Whiskey Jack is that sort of figure. Kovian really was in a lot of ways and still is. But Whiskey Jack is in a more maybe political way. I don't know. I just think he's the perfect guy for this. And I love that they stand at Hood's Gate, which also makes the name Bridgeburner have so much more significance I think. Or something to think about. Because they'll also be bridge building, but maybe first they have to burn the bridges that were there before, metaphorically, or some literal bridge, or who the heck knows? Who the heck knows? These guys that blow up bridges, that's their specialty. And now if they are the ones to rebuild the grandest bridges of all, in the end, that would be like perfect. Awesome. Yeah, so Caliph is just so interesting. Just because of this. And she like summons them. She wakes up and then summons the bridge burners because they're like, call on us if you need. And I love, you know, they're getting attacked by these other Kachane Naruks or whatever you call them. And I love that they, you know, this is a Kachane group. So when Whiskey Jack sends a whole bunch of Jagged, of all people, like imagine their eyes, the Kachane Shamal looking and seeing the Jagged coming to help. And it's like, it's the best. Whiskey Jack could have sent anyone, but he sent the Jagged. And that is awesome. Like, send your former, you know, it was the Kachane that really, like, the Jagged were bad to the IMAS, but, like, the Kachane were, that's how that kind of went. Like, imagine going to save the people who once enslaved you, right? I think it's just amazing. And I love that Whiskey Jack tells them to pretend that they're Talanai Mass, and then they all kind of have a chuckle about that. But I think, you know, it's just so, I love that. I love that touch. I don't know why that touched me so much. But I think of, like, with all the stuff that the Lethery have done, like, what will King Tehol do to kind of redeem that name? What would, you know, I know Tool was working hard to kind of help the Barghast, and we love Trots. There are Barghasts that we love, but, like, man, I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling about that, but I think it's just great. And I think it also shows what kind of a leader. They even mention it. They're like, have you ever seen a leader like this? Or whatever they said. And even the Jagged are like, yeah, he's the best. He's the best. And I just can't wait to read the first books again. So we also have Sin and Grub talking about their experiences. Grub in the Chain of Dogs. And Sin at Egatan. That was a very cool scene. And I also just think, going back to the snake, how it's so important in these books. I mean, he gets something deep in us. And I mean that in a lot of mythologies and stuff, they use some of the same sorts of symbolism for things. Like snakes will often symbolize something, and like water and trees and that sort of thing. But deserts are also something that are very significant, and we've seen it used in Raraku, specifically in kind of the rebirth or the birth of the bridge burners. In mythologies, they often will use a desert or a wasteland as if you're going into it and then coming out reborn as something new. Think of like the Exodus story, like going into Egypt and you're in a desert and then you arrive at the promised land like as a new people or whatever. And I think they use that a lot here. Like there was a birth of the people who survived Coltane's thing. What are they called? The tears, the Kundral tears, or whatever. And we have the bridge burners being born, and you wonder if something's going to be born out of these kids being in this glass desert, which is so interesting that it's glass, which I don't totally understand yet, but it's a cool thing to think about. So I just love when some of those things finally mesh in these books, and this chapter really got me, especially with the stuff about Whiskey Jack. And then it ends with this Kachane drone, Sulkit, and he seems to be like recognizing that this ghost kind of he recognizes the ghost, and it's almost like this ghost is starting to remember things from its past through this machine, this drone thing. And we get the reveal that Icarium killed his wife. And I mean, going back to the desert thing and leaving your past, and it just also makes me think of the significance of the ice fields, the jagged ice fields. But how long has Icarium had to walk away from that past? Holy smokes. If I don't know, I mean, it's more it's there's more to it than that, but very cool. Very cool. Anyway, this was chapter 13. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was a standout, certainly for this book, but also as something in Whiskey Jack that I was really, really waiting for. So, awesome. Awesome. Looking forward to the rest here. Bye.